Welcome to the Classic Planning Institute STOA. We're starting tag 4.2. This is somebody letting in the Laura or Tasneem let in people as we move forward, or Lucian.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the first thing we're going to do is some housekeeping. I'm going to read the ground rules. The traditional architecture gathering environment is one of open-mindedness and quality of discourse. Participants are encouraged to debate each other's ideas from the positions of mutual respect and good manners. By joining a session or online thread, you agree to avoid ad hominem statements regarding individuals present or absent, and sectarian, religious, partisan, political, or aesthetic ideologies for their own sake. In case of disagreement, we believe that all statements made in our community must be first heard, and then the parties submit to mediation until cordiality is resumed, or to the point of, I can live with this. Moderators will perform the duty of umpire of their own sessions. Infractions will lead to a warning and then ejection from a session upon a second occurrence. We've never used that, and I hope that we never do. Judgment calls may not be questioned in real time. Session infractions will be addressed within 48 hours of the event closing, that is Sunday night, by a quorum of 3 event organizers as elected by the organizing committee. Anyone entering and participating in tag events agrees to these rules. There's also an automatic audience media release, so that the last thing you heard me say.
Media release.
Media release. Okay, so there's the blanket media release on this. It's been extremely difficult to get continuing education units. It's very, very laborious. And anybody who wants them, be ready to pitch in and help make that happen. If you want them, send an email to cgi@classicplanning.com and do so within an hour of the end of the session. So we will know that you want a certificate of attendance for this session. Can you give? If every attendee of tag 4.2 donated $5, we could sponsor 2 students to learn traditional architecture and classic planning at the CPI. Please consider giving. The CPI and myself are very, very excited about some projects that are ongoing and upcoming. One of them is the Extreme City Makeover video series. Another one is building beautiful buildings. Everybody who knows me knows that I love doing that, and also helping communities go from their aspirations to the beautiful architecture they deserve. I want to take a few minutes to introduce the Classic Planning Institute. We steward the classical method knowledge bases. Fundamentally, that includes cooking and animal husbandry, but we haven't gotten that far yet. We're still working on the traditional architecture and classic planning. But it is exactly those knowledge bases which are at the basis really of human life, or they document the bases of human life on the planet, more so than the gazillions of books and articles and jibber jabber that we've seen in general around there. The actual classic planning library is not 1,000 books, likely. Unique to the CPI are that architecture is central to urbanism. That we are genuinely holistic as a method, and that sets us apart from all the other institutions and methods out there. We rigorously consider town and country, something that hasn't been done since before Ebenezer Howard in the same way. And we believe, unlike most other institutions, except for ACBA and 1 or 2 others, that crafts are essential. The manual construction, and this is the thrust of this session, the manual construction may be essential for human, societal, and planetary well-being. Well, we know on the planetary side with the energy and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's almost obvious, but societal, well, we have a good idea that traditional design is better for society, but in terms of the actual people working crafts manually, I think we intuitively know that there's a huge value in that. But how do we document it? How do we prove it? The 5 divisions of the CPI are a studio, an academy, the research lab, where we did this article on what happens in your brain when you walk down the street. We're going to be working alongside Ann Sussman at the happy.org, Richard Taylor, Anna Brielman, Nikos Salingaros, and Alexander Lavdas, I think, and others this year on other research. The library that I mentioned, the 1,000 books or 6,000 books or 5,000 books, I'm very excited about designing and building that. And the STOA, which is an unaffiliated, non-aligned place for people to safely meet, which is where we are. We actually are proposing a completely unique professional training curriculum, which would rely on academia for prerequisites. We would provide the coursework, but it would also require trades experience, travel requirements, and apprenticeship, something along the lines of LEAD, but for real architecture. We are therefore teaching again this year, the first year, with architectural literacy, classic planning, and year plan classes, where the 100-year plan takes us from diagrams like this into urbanism and then right down to the building level very, very quickly. Everything we do is graduate level, but highly accessible. Find us at classicplanning.org. Get a signed bookplate if you have a book and you don't have one yet, so you'll have a signed copy. Send me your address to cgi@classicplanning.com. And here, let us begin. Tag 4.2. There are 4 days. Yesterday's discussion, we heard Leon Creer speak about the completion of Washington, D.C. and a lot of COVID-oriented and other stuff that went down yesterday. Pretty amazing all around. Today, we're going to hear a lecture by Nikos Salingaros, followed by a panel moderated by Melissa Del Vecchio about hands, hearts, and brains, what I was speaking about earlier. Saturday, we're going to have Robert Adam speak about where are we going as a movement, populism versus globalism, with representatives of some of the more advanced of our colleagues. And on Sunday, Andres Duani is going to speak to the topic of this STOA gathering. Don't tell me anything I could have heard in the 20th century, and I actually would like to replace that. Don't tell me anything I could have heard before COVID. Classic Planning STOA, the safe place for conversation, and the most open conversation we have right now in our milieu. Nikos Salingaros is a professor of mathematics and architecture at the University of Texas at San Antonio, an internationally recognized architectural theorist and urbanist, holds a doctorate in mathematical physics from Stony Brook in New York. He collaborated with the visionary architect Christopher Alexander in editing the 4-volume The Nature of Order, and won the 2019 Stockholm Cultural Award for Architecture, and shared the 2018 Clem Labine Traditional Building Award with Michael Mahaffey. Before turning to architecture and urbanism, Salingaros published research on algebras, electromagnetic fields, thermonuclear fusion. Oh my God. Aside from numerous scientific articles, his books include Algorithmic Sustainable Design, Anti-Architecture and Deconstruction, A Theory of Architecture, Principles of Urban Structure, and Unified Architectural Theory. He co-authored with Michael Mahaffey the books Design for a Living Planet and New Pattern Language for Growing Region. I think you start understanding that Nikos is the guy here who is probably the greatest researcher among us in many ways. Nikos finds that the architecture profession has failed humanity. Politicians and decision makers are guilty of financial and intellectual corruption, selling the lie of economic progress, big money interests, and working in partnership with fanatical academics that have destroyed the life and beauty of the built environment. Traditional architecture and urbanism have been condemned for decades by mainstream academia and the profession. The world has become inhuman because beauty is being suppressed with alarming efficiency. By psychologically conditioning people to remove biological beauty from the world as their mission, architects as their mission, architectural education is training young people to become architectural assassins. The science upon which our civilization is based reveals the magnitude of the damage that fashionable design and academic fanaticism have inflicted upon us. The way buildings and cities are shaped is a fundamental problem of public health, not aesthetics. Those who continue to support industrial modernism and its weird inhuman derivative should be held accountable. Nikos says that society has been numbed by the complacent and ignorant media. He says that society needs to wake up from the decades-long indoctrination and demand a radical change in the way buildings and cities are shaped. He says it is time to reverse this oppression and for the contemporary world to wake up and realize that traditional architecture and urbanism hold many of the answers to creating a healthier, more human world. Nikos wishes to see the public realm turned once again into a healing environment for common people to enjoy. He wants design education philosophy to reform radically so as to learn what biological beauty really is and then turn to implementing it as a priority. Nikos Salingaros wishes for the contemporary world to once more embrace healing design through experimental evidence and time-tested traditional techniques. He can also draw, by the way. Nikos is an artist. Nikos Salingaros, I give you the podium.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Good, okay, thank you, Nir. Those were powerful and inflammatory statements.
That's all yours.
That Nir read. However, I'm here because Nir agrees in part or wholly with those statements. So thank you for the kind invitation. And for some unknown reason, I have been chosen from among many colleagues with whom I collaborate to present collective results of several groups. I begin by trying to link beauty with biological healing and contrast that with stress generation, which is the opposite of healing. It leads to illness. Long-term stress on the body lowers the mechanism that the body uses to fight infections. And the second problem with stress is that it causes autoimmune disease in the body. So this is a matter of health. Donald Ruggles, whom I see in front of me on the screen, has explicitly tried to align the future of architectural design as a problem in public health, no longer philosophy, but public health. So beauty touches the heart according to the feeling effect because the body feels the effect. We are fighting, however, decades of disinformation because our society promotes anxiety-inducing objects as beautiful. That's just disinformation. What are the foundations of the design principle that would lead to a healing environment? Well, we need a new understanding of ornament and a new understanding of urban space, which I'm happy to give today, not coming from me, but coming from recent experimental evidence using cutting-edge diagnostic techniques, which I will be presenting. The healing geometry that we would like to present links to our evolution in the natural environment. The healing geometry shaped the way the body is. The body and the neurological system of the human being is made to respond to the particular geometry. That's why it is healing. And it generates emotional nourishment. Neuroscience proves human intuition about geometries, settings, places, we feel intuitively if a place is good for us or not. That's because they're both in either pleasing or dangerous environments. So we have a myriad types of inputs that give us these signals. Adaptive design has always been a part of a traditional healing, part of medicine. Going back to the beginnings of documented medicine, we see a connection with nature, exposure to forests, to plants, but also to certain spaces, healing spaces like the medieval cloisters. That there are certain spaces and places that we feel are healing, and we go back and we see those. The beginning of hospital design, I'm talking about medieval, when scientific medicine was totally primitive, but the design played such a large part. Now, in the last few years, we have discovered that engagement, the body engaging with the environment, with the physical environment, visually, and with the other senses, is based on fractals and the inverse power distribution of sizes, which is a visual thing that I will explain in a few slides. There are additionals, there are nested symmetries and ornament, which are necessary to support human health. A statement already that contradicts a century of mainstream professional design. We are extremely fortunate that we're able to use tools like eye tracking that reveal subliminal reality, a reality that has been hidden to our eyes since the beginning of time, except for a few seers and philosophers. And that technology comes from the commercial world, nothing to do with the architecture world. So here is a sketch by me of an award-winning building. It could be an art museum that is invisible to our unconscious because the eye simply refuses to see it. But it is subliminal reality that affects the human experience. So the neural system of human beings reacts unconsciously to visual information. In the first 3 to 5 seconds, it is totally unconscious, but it makes us take decisions about what to do, whether to move away towards or to freeze. The attention that engages our body depends upon visual contrast, curves, detail, and edges, and engages us. Now, after the initial engagement, we have to almost as quickly decide, after we engage our attention, to decide whether this is good for us and we go towards it, or it's bad for us, as an animal is going to eat us, so we flee from it. But we have to engage, first of all, unconsciously, almost instantaneously, in order to make that decision. If we disengage with it, it doesn't exist. It does not have any interest for our life. Our body, our brain is created like this, because that has guaranteed our survival. Therefore, we don't see plainness. Here is the picture of subliminal reality for that award-winning building that I showed you earlier. We don't see it. It doesn't exist. It isn't there. We have those hot spots at the corners and at the edges. The building is not there. It's just blocking our view, blocking our existence, totally irrelevant to our life. So that's so much for architectural minimalism. We are able to visualize subliminal reality for the first time in a visual because of eye tracking. So how the brain interprets our environment is never obvious from a photo, because the photo shows you what human beings have seen for a million years. But those elements that determine engagement have to do with organized complexity and the elements of biophilic design that I will describe in this talk. So those elements are very particular mathematical configurations, and they determine the engagement. Now, we can go through a mathematical analysis, which is fascinating for me and very interesting. Ordinary people and architects don't care to do that. But we can obtain a very similar result by using visual attention software. So visual attention software mimics the eye scanning, actual eye scanning experiments, which are really very easy to do. This is the specialty of Anne Sussman, who is with us today and is going to deepen this conversation. But now I particularly like visual attention software because you don't even have to do the eye scanning. You just put an image and run it through the software, and it gives you those scans that I've already shown you. So let's take that useless and boring building that I showed you earlier and make it noticeable. I've added ornament. Unless the KGB comes and arrests me for breaking a century-old ban on ornament, then I have done something wonderful, because see how the eye responds to this. This is obvious from the VAS scan. Immediately now, the eye is drawn to within that facade, is drawn to a possible entrance. No longer is the eye thrown out of the building. We connect viscerally to the building through the ornament. So the holes and the hotspots in the visual attention scan can be analyzed as follows. The empty regions are holes, and they are ignored as wasted structure for the reasons I said earlier. They're of absolutely no interest to our life. Therefore, our body has evolved to ignore such things. Now, the hotspots draws our unconscious attention, but the hotspots present a problem because they draw your attention. Where is that hotspot located? If it's in some useless or irrelevant position, then something is wrong. It's distracting us from what we really should be looking at. So the position of the hotspots is very important. If the hotspots are in the wrong place and they don't focus our attention to the important parts, then the subliminal realities and the material realities contradict each other. And that creates an enormous amount of stress in the body, because we don't know what to do. Here are our VAS scans done by my colleague and friend, Dr. Alexandros Lavdas, where he found, these are his photographs, he found nice traditional buildings situated in front of a curtain-wall skyscraper. Well, look at the VAS scan. The skyscraper behind doesn't exist. The eye refuses to look there because there is no interest for life. All the attention, the engagement is with the building in front, because the building in front has organized complexity. It's a traditional design. So what's the point of architecture? Well, it's a good question to ask in this conference. Eye tracking maps how buildings influence us in a way that is determined by the human evolution. And I will even go further back. Human evolution is very recent. It's like a blip in the time scale. Most of the apparatus that we have is animal evolution. So what I'm talking about really goes back to before humans. Okay, so we humans have a bigger brain and we can do more things, but most of these mechanisms are really present in what we like to call primitive animals, but they're not as primitive as you think. So the process of engagement is really it goes back to the beginning of locomotion, the animal that's able to navigate its environments. So if the organized complexity triggers the unconscious human engagement, then it makes sense to build an environment that engages us. And in addition to engage, as I say, engagement can be further distinguished between something that's positive or something that's frightening. So hopefully something that's positive. So why do we build huge structures that we don't see unless we're forced to look at them? It's a good question. This question should be able to revise all of contemporary architecture if people paid attention to it. So here I'm giving the first of several references, and not to toot my own horn, but just to note the names of the collaborators. I have Alexandros Lavdas here and Anne Sussman. But if people are interested in the material, please look at the name of these journals. These are not cult architecture journals that just repeat the same blah, blah, blah. This is applied sciences, okay? Refereed, serious scientific journals. And then look also at the dates. This is very recent stuff. So the mainstream architecture community has no idea of these results. Let's look at this traditional facade that this is not a picture, this is a drawing, painting by me. So, not a great building, but look, the interest of the eye and therefore of the brain is contained within the facade, and the hotspots are in the windows, which they should be, but there is a general, that blue glow that we see. That means that the entire facade draws interest. So we have engaged with this facade, and the reinforced nested symmetries engage our unconscious interest. And I will anticipate the result that the blue glow, which is uniformly distributed, is really represents or gives us the picture of the coherent subliminal reality, which we feel comfortably attached to. So when the VAS, the visual attention scan, becomes homogeneous, then this happens because the contrast, the detail, and the nested symmetries increase. It's away from homogeneity. They increase, but the mathematics of the composition is coherent, so that the visual attention is increased, but it is increased in a coherent way, so the visual attention spreads uniformly throughout the figure's interior. So every portion of that figure's interior, of the facade's interior, has interest. So the subliminal reality then evolves towards coherence as we get away from homogeneity, design homogeneity. Therefore, our first important result is that the engagement with architecture requires the opposite from homogeneity in the structure. Let's think about this. This is what we evolve with. Where did we evolve? We evolved in the savannah, where nothing is homogeneous, okay? We did not evolve in the desert or in the polar ice caps where there is actual visual homogeneity. No, we evolve in the savannah. But here I go off and I link to another vast field, which is Christopher Alexander's work. And I worked with Christopher Alexander for many years. So he has, in his Nature of Order books, he gives the design tools for achieving coherence, which are independent of any style. If anyone knows the work of Christopher Alexander, he was not a classical architect. No, in fact, he has some disagreements with classical architects. But the tools that he gives for achieving coherence are style independent, and those tools are now verified by neuroscience. So the uniformly distributed blue glow can be approached by using Alexander's design techniques, such as the 15 fundamental properties, and I have written books on this, that define the geometry of living structure. So we have toolboxes. So on the one hand, we have a toolbox, design toolbox that Christopher Alexander gave 20 years ago already. And very recently, we have those diagnostic tools like the scans that I showed you that enable us to do some tests. So let's look at this facade. Where are the hotspots? There are two hotspots outside the facade because the eye doesn't want to look there. Okay, it's not as drastic as the empty facade that I showed you in the beginning, but the eye just refuses to look at this and just looks at the corner. So what does this mean? There is no interest within an incoherent facade. The geometry diverts the eye off the edges on either side. So this building might as well not be there. It lacks reflectional scaling and translational symmetries, and therefore it disengages a person's gaze. Translational symmetries are when you move in one direction and it is rhythmic, there's a rhythm. Scaling is when you scale up by multiplying. Reflectional, I will show you all later, reflectional is the mirror symmetry. So the deliberate violation of the vertical axis was done for this building for fun, and it splinters the subliminal reality. What this work, jointly with Alexander Lovelace and Anne Stutzman, shows is that evolutionary discoveries, namely discoveries embedded inside human DNA that took millions of years to discover through Darwinian processes. One of these is the mechanism of engagement, of the complex of mechanisms for engagements, are better left untouched. You are playing with the actual existence of the human being if you try to mess up with the evolutionary discoveries. So here are some recent papers. One with, there's another paper with Anne Sussman, 2020. And of course, I need to mention Anne's book with Justin Hollander, Cognitive Architecture, now in its second edition, one of the landmark recent books on this kind of adaptive design. Now, a little bit more into mathematics. It's necessary, I'm sorry, but I need to explain these concepts, and they're not too difficult. Visual attention scan reveals engaging subliminal reality as a uniformly distributed blue glow. And I explained how this is very, very complex, but it is at the same time, it is highly coherent because of the mathematics. And that's what the human brain has evolved to prefer. But there are two different and opposite types of complexity. One is empty. So the emptiness is totally disengaging. We refuse to look at it. It makes us uncomfortable. But there's another opposite. So we're not talking about a problem on a line. We're talking about a two-dimensional problem because there are two opposites. The other opposite is complex and random. And that's also disengaging, because there's a lot of stuff happening there, but the eye does not know how to make sense out of it. So here I have if somebody wants it, I have an article that discusses these three cases of complexity. Now, let me move on to more practical matters, a new understanding of urban space. We perceive urban space the same way as our ancestors perceived the landscape of our emergence, with our body and heart. And neurological studies now imply that we should design the built environment with traditional typologies. Why? Because traditional typologies actually engage our body and heart when we are in an urban space. For the last several decades, urban spaces have been designed to disengage with our body and heart. So here is a very Alexandrian paper, Rules for Urban Space, also very recent for those who are interested. And here VAS scan from our recent paper with Nir Buras. This is a disengaging, hence a useless urban space. If you look at carefully and compare the top and the bottom, you see where the hotspots are. Well, the hotspots are at the sign for the parking garage, and then also at the road sign. The entire urban space and the facades are disengaging. The third hotspot is the reflection of that miserable artificial creek that runs in the middle. None of the structure of this urban space is engaging. This is totally useless. And of course, you walk there and you don't feel engaged with it. So this is the paper with Anne Brielman, Nir Buras, and Richard Taylor, just this year, 2022. What happens in your brain when you walk down the street? And it really lives up to my original promise that we have a new approach to urban space. Now, in that paper, which is a rather long paper, but I urge everyone to read it, we outline the quasi-instantaneous perception cycles that inform people's direction and speed of ambulation. Things happen in the brain because of the input of the geometry of the environment, and of course, totally outside our control. And it's a cycle: click, 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 many, many, many times per second, and they inform the body whether we want to walk in this direction or not, and how fast to walk. Now, most urban spaces give us the signal of don't come here, don't walk in this direction. So we have to force our body. What happens when you force your body? Then you generate stress. So the industrial modernist urban design is an engine for generating stress. And you talk to any doctor and they will tell you, well, of course, you're going to get sick, you're going to get autoimmune responses, you're going to get horrible diseases, and you're going to lower your natural system for combating disease, and you're going to let all these microbes affect your health. So this is the inconvenient truth that we have to face, that since World War II, we have been building in a manner disassociated from the brain's needs. And therefore, the things that we have built cause anxiety and stress, with the great exception of people who are attending today's conference, because those are classical and traditional architects. They have always known how to create adaptive environments. But I'm talking about now the 99% majority who build signature buildings and who worship signature buildings. But that's not about humans, it's to extract profit at the expense of the city. So here is a boost for my book with Michael Mahaffey, Design for a Living Planet. And why does the society accept the anti-city? Because they have been taught to do that, while we have been training design professionals and keeping them ignorant of the rules for engaging with public space. So they design and build urban space that is totally useless. So it's not enough that in the cities were gutted to erase open pedestrian space, but even where pedestrians are allowed, the psychological ambience is such that this is the anti-city. You don't feel like walking there, you're repelled by it. And I'm sad to say, including the suburbs. The suburbs do not have defined urban space. It's also either the downtowns today with the giant glass skyscrapers, or the suburbs, the space is hostile, and we have the anti-city. Now, time to get into fractals. We all know fractals. There's a fractal structure which occurs in smaller and smaller dimensions. How do you tell a fractal? Well, you look at the sub-elements. There are many different sizes, and as you magnify a fractal, there is structure all the way down, and a mathematical fractal you can keep magnifying infinite number of times. But if you have something that's defined exclusively on 1 or 2 scales, then it is not a fractal. Well, look at what we have been building lately and gutting our cities. Those are not fractals because they're defined at maximum 1 or 2 scales. I want to describe a little bit what a fractal is. A fractal is linked through similarity. So you have shapes that are magnified up and magnified down, and they look more or less similar, and you put them together. The second component is the distribution of sizes, which is very simple to state. If you have small pieces, then there are more small pieces than bigger pieces. So the more copies of small elements are present. And the distribution of sizes is an inverse power law. And surprise, surprise, animal ecosystems have the same inverse power law. You have a few elephants, and then you have more smaller, more tapirs, and then you have many mice size, and you have billions and trillions of bugs and beetles, and then you have trillions and trillions of ants and small things. It's the inverse power law. It's a universal rule because all stable complex systems, for example, the internet, electrical power grids in a city, nothing to do with fractal shapes that we think about in design. All of these stable complex systems obey the rule of the distribution of sizes. So here is a little picture to show you how in traditional architectures, you have the distribution of sizes, you have similar elements, they don't have to be identical. You have similar elements, and there are more of the smaller pieces than there are of the intermediate, and not very few larger pieces. For a perfect fractal, everything is similar. That means the same after magnification. But and the reason that this is an advantage for the brain is that the brain processes recursive patterns. It does the GIF fractal compression, image compression, if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it doesn't matter. But it's a huge survival advantage because you process an image and you can get the information in an environmental image very quickly without wasting time in order to make a decision on your survival. The human body is fractal. Now, all plants are fractals. For the animals, you have to really look inside to see the fractal shape. But we are just as fractal as plants, except it's not so obvious from the outside. How about architecture? Materials, fractal materials. The preferred materials, which is plate glass, steel beams, titanium sheets, are not fractal. They're deliberately not fractal. They deny connection to the brain, hand, and the heart. It's not for me to make a decision, but I think this is a deliberate choice of materials in order to detach the brain, hand, and heart from our built environment. Now, we happen to have the great pleasure of having Richard Taylor, the world's foremost authority on fractals, here with us today. And he is going to tell us a little more later. So here is a statistical fractal, namely, it doesn't have to be, when you magnify it, as long as there's some interesting complexity happening, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. Okay, that's enough for the fractal effect. Somewhere before you get to the microscale, there is the size of the handles, the hand size. All animals experience tactile and visual organized detail, but the eye needs complexity that offers reassuring handles. Can be physical handles that you can actually touch, like a ledge or a piece of ornamentation that is three-dimensional sculpted ornamentation. That's extremely important, especially for the child's development, because it helps to train the brain in cognition. Now, we can add all of these effects because these are effects due to different mechanisms. We have the biophilic healing index, that we have color and curves and detail and organized complexity, which are the nested symmetries and representations of nature. And without those, we cannot create a healing environment. So at most you can get 30%, and even that is generous. So if you have plants and you have sunlight and you have water, you get most 30%. Well, people are misled to believe that if you have plants and sunlight, then it's a healing environment. No, well, you're getting 30%. It's not very good. These are the original experiments that established the biophilic effect by Roger Ulrich. Now, note this date, 1984. And the design world has totally ignored this until very, very recently with the introduction of talking about biophilia. Now, vertical axis is necessary for animals. Animal means that you ambulate. You need the bilateral symmetry in order to be able to walk. So you need the gravity. The inner ear of the human senses the gravitational axis. Therefore, we expect to engage with things that are vertical. In our brain, our evolution has imprinted the recognition of an upright face, the symmetries about the vertical axis. And without that, we would have been eaten long ago. And without that, we would not connect to, when we're babies, we cannot connect to our mother. So this is a big point that Donald Ruggles makes in his book and in the film, which Donald is here, and hopefully he will talk about this. So here we have the VAS scan. Where does the VAS scan go? Well, it goes to the eyes and the brow of the lion. So by looking at the eyes and the brow, if the brow is furrowed, the lion is not happy. He may be getting ready to attack you. Okay, if he seems calm, then maybe you can back off and get away before he eats you. So ornament, putting all of this stuff together gets you into ornament. And I think I'm going to end quickly, but I don't want, I don't want to skip the slide without mentioning our friend Mark Hewitt. He has a lovely new book, Draw in Order to See. The title doesn't make any sense. Well, if you think about it, when you look at something, try to draw it, and then it reveals everything that I've been talking about, all the structure. Let your hand draw. And really, you see much better if you draw the thing, because the hand coordinates with the eye in order to uncover all the mathematical patterns that I have been talking about, the biophilic elements and everything else. So I highly recommend the book. And we have Mark here, who hopefully will talk about that. So ornament grows out of the love of life. And children instinctively ornament their surroundings because they want to make it engaging. Some contemporary architects say a sales pitch because it's disengaging. If something on the small scale is disengaging, it is not ornament, it is useless. All animals require ornament. The octopus ornaments its garden. Birds and fish use ornament for sexual display. And I don't mean ornament on their body, which is genetic. I mean actually taking things and making ornamentation. And in our recent Brazilian film, Mark Hewitt talked about the bowerbird that builds the ornamented nest. Here is some symmetries. Okay, symmetry deficit disorder. Does the symmetry deficit disorder lower a child's intelligence? Well, it does in fish and mice because there is a 25 to 30% reduction in the size of the brain. The deficit also of ornament. In an article we wrote with Michael Mahaffey in 2012. But in more recent work, there is data from the COVID measurement of significantly lowered intelligence of children, babies born during the COVID, and I have published 2 papers on that recently. Here we are, yes, with Marco Aresta and with Alexandros Lavdas. This is alarming. This could be a revolution in the interior design, because the disengaging ornament could be toxic for children's intelligence. All those minimalist environments that the movie stars like to prefer. But what have we had? Architecture schools have tried to cut our ability to engage with the world. And they have tried social engineering to change human DNA in an evolutionary regression. Fortunately, Lamarckian evolution doesn't work, but it doesn't stop the architecture schools from trying. So to conclude, we have a new blueprint for architectural theory that is informed by environmental information. We know now what geometries keep people healthy, and we know what makes people sick. And we can use scientific research, a wonderful new architecture, and to prove the traditional architecture design rules developed to boost our health. So I hope we can go forward from this point. Okay, I am finished, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Nikos. That was terrific. Nir, is there anything you want to say before I think we should take just a short break. It's a long time to sit on these Zoom calls. So we'll probably take a 5-minute break, I think, and then come back to our discussion. Nir, is there anything else you want to say before we do that?
Thank you for asking. This was lovely, Nikos. Thank you for really giving us a wonderful survey of what's out there with regard to all this. I think we're working, the lot of us, towards bringing all this information together, useful and acceptable, and everything else. Thank you. Wait to hear the panel. You want to take a 5-minute break, and we will be back shortly.